Welcome to Building Better Businesses, an ABA podcast. Learn firsthand from business owners who built successful ABA businesses. Utilize proven techniques and strategies to help your practice thrive. This is Building Better Businesses, an ABA podcast with Jonathan Mueller.
Seth Powers holds his MBA from the University of Connecticut and his master's in public health from Yale. He's the co-director of the Center for Children with Special Needs. And CCSN is a multidisciplinary behavioral health practice that has been serving patients, families, school systems, and governmental partners since 1994. Seth has a strong eye towards system-level capacity building models. And Seth, welcome to the pod.
Great to see you. Thank you. Good morning.
Yeah. So Seth, tell me about your entrepreneurial journey at CCSN.
It's a good question. And sometimes it's hard to think about what does entrepreneurialism look like in an organization that's been around for 30 years. And it looks different from an organization that's a startup. So I joined CCSN formally about 7 years ago and had informally been associated with it my whole life. My father started the practice in 1994. And through the first part of my career, I was in business, I was in finance, business development work. And one of the things that he and I would frequently talk about in the earlier years of the center were what he was doing and how he was thinking around the clinical components of this practice and the business side of things and the strategy side of things. And we would have conversations to and from my rides to business school when I was going at night in the early part of my career. And I was sort of sharing with him what I was learning in class without realizing he was probably getting an MBA by proxy. So through the years, we continued that conversation and we got to a point where CCSN had grown to be pretty large. And our conversations were thinking around what does the organization look like and what does the organization need from a business perspective such that it can continue on its clinical mission as effectively for the next 30 years as it has for the past 30 years. And that was an ongoing conversation for years. And when we looked at that, we looked at what are some of the best practices from business? What are the things that businesses do really, really well, regardless of industry? So healthcare and non-healthcare. And are there some of those tools, some of those themes, some of those best practices that we could find a way to bring into CCSN to help really unlock additional opportunities, find ways to serve families and school systems and educational partners in ways that we hadn't been able to historically, or build upon the systems that we had in place that were really good. So, I don't think of what we do as being entrepreneurial, although I suppose in the strictest sense, it could be considered as such. I think a lot about what we do of how do we find those systems, find those tools, learn from other industries, and bring them in to continue what we believe to be a really strongly mission-driven practice. And we've seen a lot of success in that. We've certainly had our challenges, I think, like many have, but we've seen a lot of success. And we're looking forward to where we're going to be able to go forward from here.
I like how you describe the idea of like MBA by proxy, because I think in our field, like seeing those like letters MBA, it's almost like, ooh, there's this, I don't know there's this like veil put up. And honestly, like I have my MBA too, but like that was, and it was a phenomenal experience. Don't get me wrong, but it was mostly a great experience because I met great people. I got to travel around the world, right? And I got exposed to different, some different concepts, but like, getting your MBA legitimately is truly about like working in an organization and like failing through things, learning. And that feels like me to an MBA. And I think that's what I heard as you described MBA by proxy. Is that right?
My experience with the MBA, it sounds like perhaps it was similar to yours, was as I was going through it, at least at UConn, I think UConn had a reasonably strong program when I did it, but it felt like you were learning how to be a really good worker for somebody. There wasn't a lot of critical thing. It was how do you work within a big established system? Mm-hmm. So I was finding what I was doing a lot of was having to translate and how to translate what we were learning in the classroom to, at the time I was working full time. So how do you translate what you're learning in the classroom to what you're doing in a full-time setting? I was not in healthcare at the time. And that act of translating and that effort of going through and really trying to figure out what are the concepts, what are the deeper meanings, how do you figure out a case study that's around somebody who opened a brewery, and how do you leverage those same concepts to support, distribution across a new small business network, as an example, which is some of the stuff I was doing before. So I feel like I had gotten a lot of experience in that translation, and I was experiencing, even during the course of the program, that there were limits to how applicable and how much I could generalize directly. So when it gave me the opportunity to come to CCSN, for me, it almost felt a little bit like we had these superpowers, in sense like big businesses, Fortune 500 companies figure out how to do this stuff real well. These places are chock full of, people who know this stuff, have gone to these programs, have really understood, how to do some of these systems exceptionally well and efficiently. And how do we take those same concepts and bring them to something that's mission driven? And getting into something that we felt was mission driven, and was that it was really moving the needle for people's lives and being able to see that improvement. It was fulfilling in a way, and it continues to be fulfilling in a way that I haven't experienced other places professionally. So bringing that skill set and figuring out how to do it in an environment where there's both a need. I think that, when we talk about, and when I've met other behavioral health practice leaders, people have varying degrees of background. Some of them have business, some of them have no business, some of them have pure clinical, and they grew their practice. So I think everybody's kind of learning in this community together, and there's a big appetite for that. But there's also, in many ways, and I've shared this term with you before, but a bit of what I perceive to be a dual mandate in healthcare. So it's not maximizing the bottom line is not the goal in healthcare. It's having really exceptional clinical outcomes. And how do we measure for that? And how do we implement systems that support that? And in many ways, my experience had been the MBA doesn't prepare you for that. It prepares you for how to make quarterly statements and how to do all of the financially driven things, because in business, that is what rules the roost. In healthcare, that's not what it is. And if anything, the way that we've approached it at CCSN with I think a reasonable amount of success has been, we know what the clinical mission is, and we know what we want to do, and we know that we want to improve the lives of our patients and our families, and we want to be able to implement large scale change. How do we take all of the tools we have in our tool belt, whether we got them from clinical backgrounds, whether we got them from business backgrounds, from healthcare backgrounds, from whatever, and how do we bring the best of those tools together to serve that mission?
That's just like a beautiful melange that you painted. And I like that you described the dual mandate. That is, and I actually think about this as like a trifecta mandate. I don't know if that's the right term, but it's patient outcomes, patient satisfaction, and caregiver or employee satisfaction. And solving for all three of those, I think, is part of the beautiful opportunity that is healthcare, but part of, frankly, what makes healthcare so hard, right, is trying to maximize across all of them. Coming back to this idea of building and creating systems and borrowing from the best. I know you've been focused at CCSN on creating these scalable operations. What prompted that, Seth? And what advice do you have for ABA organizations who want to build out really replicable, high quality operations?
Let me open with, we're still in the process. So I can share my personal experience and my personal perspective on this. I have also learned far more from working with colleagues, from talking to folks like you, talking to other folks, and trying to broaden my own knowledge base. So I come to this as a student, not as an expert. I want to open there. What we've seen is that the center, for the first 20 years of its existence, was a pretty small organization. 20, 30 people. We didn't accept any commercial insurance. It was all fee for service. We had big contracts that were pretty stable. So in many ways, the operational side of that didn't have the degree of complexity that we saw since we moved into a model that accepted commercial insurance, where we have ABA and outpatient therapy and occupational therapy, credentialing providers, insurance contracts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the things that we saw were that the systems that the organization had in place were great systems, and we were outgrowing them. And at times we were outgrowing them more quickly than we realized, or we were having systems that we had outgrown already, but we were staying with them because we knew them and they were comfortable and they were functionally working. one of the analogies I say to the team is that the hardest thing to do is change a tire on a car when you're going 60 miles an hour down the highway. If you're running a little low before you get in the car, change the tire. And it can be really hard to change something that isn't presently broken. But because you're worried about it, or you think, or if you look where the future's headed, that you're concerned that there's going to be stress points on it, changing something that otherwise feels like it's working is tough. And it's a hard sell job at times. And for an organization where we hadn't had to have that sort of seismic change, and we had been able to make these very kind of small incremental changes for decades, there was a lot of change management that we've been working through the team to support that. In terms of the system building and the scalability, you get to a point where, particularly with insurance-based models, so much of it is contingent upon volume. So where can you maximize the service delivery time and the time that's dedicated to service delivery or clinical review or clinical note-taking, and minimize transaction time? So as an example, if we have our clinicians and it takes them 4 minutes extra to, I don't know, convert a note or to do some sort of documentation because the process that we've designed behind the scenes is inefficient, and we're going from SharePoint to a server to online, and it makes it hard. We get into a position there where you multiply that and you look at that at scale and you say, what if we had 100 clinicians that each had 4 minutes per transaction back a day? What does that look like? How much more time could they spend slowing down and writing their clinical notes or talking to their colleagues? Or how can we de-stress the system? So as we're thinking around this from an operational perspective, it's a lot of how do we build these systems that can scale? And then also, how do we build systems that are replicable across multiple people? So one of the things that we had the luxury of doing is, for years, because we were so small, we could say, oh, Seth is just going to do this, or Mark's just going to do this, or Jonathan's just going to do this. And you get bigger and you can't have somebody who's entirely responsible for a vertical because it becomes completely overbearing. You can't have one person in our size that's doing insurance. You can't have one person doing scheduling. So then it comes back to the best practice of, if you're going to have other people involved, if you need to have other people involved to have the right level of support and redundancy, and God forbid somebody take a vacation or any of the things that call us out of work, the organization has the back end mechanism so that we can continue. So looking at how do we bring in technology, how do we leverage people's strengths, how do we really document and build replicable models, especially operationally, administratively, has been key. CCSN is so exceptionally fortunate because we have clinical teams that are, and I don't say this hyperbolically, global experts in training. We have teams that go all over the world to provide training programs, capacity building programs. We've done international work for decades all over the globe. And we are now in a position where we're saying, let's take some of those best practices around how do we train and support other organizations, and let's look inward. And let's make sure that our own processes are following those best practices. And let's give ourselves all of the care and attention that we've given others, such that we can be really successful and effective in that scale. Getting to a point where organizationally we are clear and comfortable and transparent and redundant in our back end systems will allow for better clinical care. And I think we're all very clear eyed on that. And pushing through and managing through the change in order to facilitate that is change. I heard a great quote years ago at a leadership conference. It was the only people who like change are wet babies. So, part of this is helping people understand the change. There's great change management models. We've used the ADKAR model in the past, but there's great change management models to help people sort of process through and get to the new state. And we've seen a lot of really exciting success. We've had a great team who's been very involved, very committed. So it's an exciting part of our journey right now on that mission.
Dude, I mean, you spoke to me on so many levels here, and I want to come back and ask you about that ADKAR model of change management, because I think the change management is just something that's so hard to get right. But you said this idea of like 4 minutes, if we can say 4 minutes on a session note, right? What's really important that I want people to hear here is there's no silver bullet when you're thinking about how do we get more time back for our clinical team to fulfill like this triple bottom line. Like, there's not a silver bullet. It's at the level of understanding like discrete effort and how you reclaim that discrete effort back. In fact, like in my management consulting career, we used to have activity-based costing projects where we would go in and you'd say, whether it's in a manufacturing facility or distribution warehouse, whatever it was, and you would actually time and say, how long does each of these things take? And then where can we recapture 30 seconds a minute, maybe multiple minutes. So that's really important. And this idea that like, as a rapid, and most ABA providers, I think generally are growing quickly because there's so much need. Like every time an organization triples in size, everything breaks. To your point around like the car and needing to like fill up tires, right? Going 60 miles an hour. So that all resonates. But tell me more about the ADKAR model of change management.
I absolutely speak about ADKAR. One thing I also want to, when we think around the transaction time, at times there's like the obvious things, like, could I change where a note format is housed? And that way you don't have to go to 6 places and it gets done more quickly. That's a pretty linear change, but there's also changes that are a little bit more peripheral. So as an example, if part of your model depends on email communication and the email communications then become overwhelming and then people can't get to their emails because they've got 400 emails a day and then other things fall off, you have this cascading effect. So there is an inefficiency, and the genesis of that inefficiency is born from a system that had been designed that had worked at a point in time, but has either we've outgrown or we've evolved beyond, or our operations have become complex to the point it no longer works. And pick what it is. But what you have is this cascading effect. And then in that cascading effect, there's ripples. So what happens if you have a team member who can't get out of an email bin of 400 emails, and every day they come in and they can do 300, and then there's 400 the next day, and that debt continues to grow? That's a huge employee satisfaction concern. It's a huge burnout concern. Then it creates stress and frustration, because that stress and frustration of someone saying, "Hey, Seth, I emailed you on this. Didn't you see it?" And I want to say, "Of course I didn't see it. Do you know how many emails I get?" So it is again, not to overstate this, but like these systems can become cancerous. And it is not just it'd be nice if we can save a minute or two here. It's that if you don't address these things, I think that they can cause failure in an organization. So when we think around what our priorities are, I am so steadfastly focused, along with my co-director, Mark Palmieri, on addressing these items. We can't be successful unless we have back-end systems that will allow us to be successful. Sorry, I took you off a little bit there.
No, that's right. I mean, what you're describing is like this level of intention around operations and systems and models that I think it's easy to take for granted that those will just sort of evolve. And no, as you're pointing out, this is not just like a full-time job. It's like a full-time organizational investment of energy in order to get that right. But yeah, tell me briefly about ADKAR.
I will share with you my understanding of it, which is a non-academic understanding by a mile. But it's a change management model it's a change management model that sort of works across different steps towards change. So awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. There's a bunch of these various change management type models, but sort of the idea is you can't start introducing, here's going to be a new system, until you have an organization that understands what the deficiencies in the current system are. And it's a model of sort of helping people through that. And like I said, there's plenty of different models in this one. This is one that I was exposed to early in my career and it's stuck. But making people aware of what the issue is first, and then the desire to change. So, hey, first, the system sucks. Okay, now I get that it sucks. Now I want to change. I don't know how to change. So then introducing the knowledge for how to do that. Say, this is the way that you do it. And then giving people the tools in order to actually affect that change. Then once they're doing that, go into a reinforcement model. I don't have a clinical background, but there's pretty strong similarities to clinical service delivery models on some of this too.
Yeah, it sounds like that. There's like it's behavior analytic informed, if not, fully created by behavior analysts, and that's powerful. And one of the things I think I learned early in my career around change management is like focus like 80% of my time on the why, to your point around like helping people understand deficiencies, as opposed to the what, and here's how you now fill out this new form or make this request or schedule this session. It's people have to be bought into and understand the why. So 80% of the time on that is critical. Well, you mentioned your co-director, Seth, and like me, I'm a co-CEO in my two organizations with my co-founder, business partner, Will Bainig. That's pretty unique in our field, man. And actually, I'll tell you, like 3.5 years ago, before Will and I formally became co-CEOs, I still have an email that I sent to like our advisor and Will that was like, if we ever consider co-CEO, then just like fire me, because I think who would ever be a co-CEO? Stupid. The only person I knew was like Mark Benioff from Salesforce. I don't know if you know him. Yeah. Like he and his co-CEO, Mark Benioff, would wear like the Hawaiian shirts. So anyway, the Hawaiian shirts are cool, but whatever. So, but this is pretty rare. Why did you create a co-director position, and what's been your experience?
So I want to, I guess, first open with, I didn't create it myself. So this was a collaborative effort, and we decided, really, what does the organization need? We need to have really, really strong business, operational, administrative leadership, and we need to have exceptionally strong clinical leadership. We have, for the entirety of CCSN, the organization has driven itself to be in the 99th percentile for clinical service delivery. We need to be operating at the same level on the business, operational, administrative side. So what this co-director model allowed us to do is, so my co-director, the co-director at CCSN, Dr. Mark Palmieri, is a psychologist. He's a BCBA. He's been leading the organization clinically for, I think, coming on 20 years, and he's exceptional. And he does things clinically that I would never be in a position to be able to do. And he can provide that level of clinical leadership and insight, and he understands what the needs are of the organization. He can help conceptualize cases for the team. And we viewed as an organization, and the three of us had talked about this. We talked about this at CCSN. Having a model where we have the top of the clinical pyramid be a clinician is really important. Those are clinical decisions. And when there's times that the clinical decisions and the financial decisions butt up against each other, those are conversations that Mark and I have directly. And what we do is we insulate the rest of the team from the financial implications to the extent we can, from the financial implications to clinical decision making. We have always said we're going to do the right clinical thing, whether it means we're doing it pro bono, whether it means that we're taking on a case that's going to require 10x the amount of time that we would have anticipated that it would, because we need to have that degree of case conferencing and case management. So we do those things because those are the right things to do clinically. At the same time, I wouldn't have any expectation that Mark would be able to manage a balance sheet or figure out details around a P&L or build financial models to stand up, new centers, new service lines, what have you, to the extent that I would, because I have that training and I have that experience. So what he and I have found is that this shared leadership model has actually been, I think it's been exceptional. There's a tremendously high degree of bidirectional trust between he and I, which is important. And, through the years, he and I have had to figure out how do we manage an organization with two peers at the head of it, and how do we work through things at a point of consensus where there's not going to be somebody who says we're doing it this way, we're doing it that way. It has forced at times decisions to go a little bit more slowly, but I think it's forced us to really think hard around our values and making sure that we are not violating one for the other. So a good example would be, and this wouldn't happen, but an example would be, if the right clinical decision was to take on a service line that was going to lose us money every time we did it, we need to have somebody who can build and understand those financial models. And we need to then have the ability to collaborate and say, this might be a really exciting clinical thing, but here are the ramifications. So if we want to do that, here's what our trade-offs can be. Or maybe we don't do it because it's going to overstress the system. And that has worked really nicely. Same going the other direction of, we're participating with a grant, a waiver program in the state of Connecticut for individuals with acquired brain injury. And it's been a really interesting clinical endeavor. It is not something core to necessarily what we would have historically done, but it has given our team the opportunity to support this population and do so in a really impressive and exciting way, and now being invited in to present at their conferences and really step into a new service area. That was something where we had to figure out, how do we make the economics of this work? It's completely different. They're state-funded programs. The economics are never quite as favorable. But how do we do that? And we've been able to do it because of that really high degree of coordination and collaboration between he and I. And it's been really exciting. And it's an area that we're seeing a lot of growth in.
ABA practice owners, are billing and insurance issues getting you down? Well, let me tell you, Element RCM is your answer. Element provides world-class revenue cycle management services, contracting, credentialing, authorizations, billing, and more. Element's your partner, so you can focus on what you love to do, providing the highest quality services to your families and clients. Element's a preferred partner of the Behavioral Health Center of Excellence, and its founders have nearly 20 years of experience owning and operating successful ABA organizations. They understand you. They know that every dollar counts, that integrity is everything. Element works with any practice management system. And Element's not a vendor, they're your partner. So find out more and take a free revenue cycle assessment at elementrcm.ai. Yeah, you said, I think you said tremendously high degree of bi-directional trust. And I think this is really critical to what sounds like has been a really successful experience for you and Dr. Palmieri and for me and Will. It's like it requires sort of like clarity up front, but then the right partnership. So this idea of co-directors or co-CEOs isn't right for every organization, but it is absolutely powerful when you do have that trust. And yeah, I mean, and thinking about speaking about trust, you're part of a family business. And there's this interesting expression in Chinese, Seth, about from rice paddy to rice paddy in 3 generations. That is, you've got like someone who works hard and then like gains wealth and starts a business and passes it down to their son, and that goes okay, and then goes to this next generation. That boom, before you know it, like the family's back in the rice paddy. Well, clearly you all have been successful. What have you learned working with family in a business?
It's an interesting question. And if you were to talk to the folks at our organization, I don't think people would describe it as a family business, so the relationship exists, but it has never been conceptualized like that. There was never a period of like, because you're family that you're going to be involved. Actually, it was quite the opposite. And my original involvement first came when we were doing some consulting early on around sort of what's some strategic planning for CCSN, and I was supporting it from the outside, and I was providing sort of thought and insight and feedback. And one of the outcomes of that whole process was the consultants at the time looked at my father, who started the practice, and they said, "You probably should figure out a way to get him in here because I think he could be helpful for you guys long term." So it was. I think that it happened. The family piece of it made it really nice. It wasn't critical. I'll tell you, what I said to people early on. So we have grown so much over the last couple of years, and between COVID and all kinds of things, I haven't had an office for like 2 years. So right now I'm in my home office. I'm usually in a laptop wherever I can find a little kid table in an open ABA room. But when I had an office, one of the things that was so nice about that is, I saw my dad every day. Like, who as an adult gets to see their dad every day and give your dad a hug every day? That was really special. And just getting the opportunity to do that and learn from him. He's brilliant. He is, and I say that very genuinely. And having the opportunity to learn and to listen and to really see how he built an organization through the values that are important to him as a person, and to see how those values have then grown and cascaded and created reputation, created careers for people, launched careers for folks who have moved on. It's really been, it has been such an honor. I worked for, before coming, I was senior in these various other organizations and had the opportunity to work for very senior leaders and be exposed to the C-suites of the Fortune 100 types. And the leadership skills and the natural leadership abilities that I've experienced working with my father have been, he is ahead of any of them. And they've all gone through all kinds of leadership courses and training. And the amount I've had the opportunity to learn there has really been a gift. In terms of what the family dynamic is, though, we've worked pretty hard at that, to be honest, to make sure that we are able to bifurcate. We talk about work when it's time to talk about work, and we talk about family when it's time to talk about family. So if we see each other on the weekends, we're not talking about things here. When he's visiting his granddaughter, he's visiting his granddaughter. We're not talking about things that are going on at the office. And we've had to be pretty boundaried. It's been a bit of a learning curve through the years for both of us. But I think we've gotten pretty good at it, and that's been really important. It's also, you think about a family business, and one of the things that I had to contend with, and again, very openly and honestly, is that when I was brought in, it was like, oh, Michael's son is here. What kind of nepotism is this? And it was almost you had to, and it was something that was real and it was important, and you had to confront it head on. So what am I doing there? So is it, oh, he's just got his son here because X, Y, or Z? It's because this is somebody, regardless of familial relation, who has background and experience, who can help this organization to be successful. And that took effort from everybody to kind of work over that hump, including myself. I had to figure out how do I personally overcome that perception. And I think through the years, at this point, I've been there long enough. I think that's probably largely subsided, or it's in the background. But that's a thing. And I think that it's something where if there's others who are going to be going into this space or considering doing sort of a similar model, don't lie to yourself and say that it's not real. So you might be the best psychologist in the entire world, but if you're going to go in and work for family members, there's going to be like, oh, well, Jonathan's mom owns the place, so here he is again. So I think these are the kind of things that they're important, and there's cultural importance too. So to pretend that it wasn't there when it was on everybody's mind is a challenge. You have to talk about it. You have to confront it head on, address the concerns. And I think it's something where, we've done that successfully. I think we're years beyond that being any sort of an issue, but it is something that had been real. It's also been really enjoyable though. So I don't want to cloud this whole experience. Actually, it's been tremendously enjoyable, and it's been fun to grow something with a bunch of like-minded folks who really want to invest and grow in what we all believe to be just exceptional clinical care.
Dude, the wisdom and intention that I keep hearing it is just awesome, Seth. And so let me pivot. Right? Actually, this episode is going to drop, and you're speaking in early March at the Behavior Analyst Leadership Council conference in Miami. And so, and I just learned about this conference like a few months ago, I'll be honest, and I was so excited to know that it was happening. What's your topic? What's the most important takeaway you want the audience to have?
So Mark and I are presenting together on this, and we're actually going to do a presentation on the balance of business and clinical leadership. So how do you lead an organization? I don't know that we'll specifically talk about a co-director model, but that general idea of how do you bring together the business and the clinical to ensure exceptional outcomes. We have, I think, a full day workshop, and then we're doing a half day workshop, and then we have a shorter talk on one of the later days. So it should be great. This is a really good conference. We've been participating in it as it's been in Connecticut the last couple of years. Obviously, with COVID, things have gone a little bit sideways, but we're really excited to be down there presenting. As we're in there, we'll be talking around, what are some of the tools? What are some of the things that we've done? Where very openly, where are some of the challenges that we've had? How we overcome those challenges? We view our participation in the behavioral health autism care provider community to be a very collaborative one. And one of the things that I've so appreciated about organizations like Bulk or organizations like CASP, the Council for Autism Service Providers, has been this community and this willingness for us all to help each other along. There's enough pie to go around, and we have the ability to help each other get better at what we do and learn from one another. And as much as I've called you before, certainly before this podcast, and I've asked you if you could talk to our team about some of the things that you guys have done at Ascend that have been so successful, I've had the opportunity to do that for other organizations too. And I think that this feeling of community and this openness is going to be helpful for everybody. I think one of the things that I think about here, because someone might look at that outside this interview and say, you're giving away competitive secrets. What the hell are you doing? How are you ever going to be the best, the biggest, the most profitable, whatever, if you're giving away all your tricks? I think it should be open source. we're not doing anything special. We'll tell everybody every single thing that we're doing, and you do it better than us. And then tell us how you improve so we can do it better. Because at the end of the day, the people that are going to win here are going to be our patients and their families. We are going to have better clinical outcomes. We're going to see improved patient care. We're going to see higher employee satisfaction. We will collectively have a better sense around what public policy initiatives we should be pushing for, we should be working with our legislative partners for. This all gets better the more we all work together. And we've seen that certainly through CASP, where we can harness the power of so many smart and motivated and vision-oriented colleagues to really move the needle on things. Laura Unum at CASP has been just a force, and it's been so exciting to work with her and to partner with her, and to help drive her mission as she, as an example, led autism insurance bills in all 50 states. So this is things that the more we come together, the more we can dedicate to improve all of our organizations.
Listeners, pay attention. This idea of pay it forward, I believe, is an obligation. And to your point, Seth, the people who win are clients and families, our team members, when we can do things better, when we can collaborate. And this old era of conflict in our fields and guardedness, I don't give a shit what happened and why all that happened. What's important is that leaders now can move the spirit of collaboration forward. So in that spirit of collaboration, Seth, what's one thing every ABA business owner and leader should start doing? And what's one thing they should stop doing?
As I said before, I want to preface with, I don't want to sound preachy here. So I'll tell you the things that we have found to be successful and the things that we have found to be challenging, and hopefully others can garner some insight from that if that's helpful. Something, if you haven't done this already, is take the time to distill down what's really important and what's really important professionally. So what are the 4 or 5 things your organization needs to do to be successful? If for folks who are familiar with the concept of a balanced scorecard, I'm a big proponent of that. A balanced scorecard is a way to look across key domains and then list 2, 3, 4 really key initiatives or quality indicators across each of those primary domains, with the idea being that when you can distill down to this more manageable list of things to watch, other things follow from it. So as an example, if client satisfaction is important to you, there's a pretty high likelihood there's going to be a relationship between, to some degree, client satisfaction, staff satisfaction, clinical outcomes. Not exclusively, but you can't just give people what they want forever and ever and ever. But at the same time, if you've got clients who are just really, really unhappy, that's probably going to mean that there's more turnover and they're not going to stay with you as long. Then staff aren't going to have the ability to form those longitudinal relationships. And then you're going to have a lot of it, you potentially are going to have staff turnover issues. And then you're going to be running into instances where your clinical outcomes are going to suffer because you're not going to have the ability to work on whatever the programs are over the prescribed period of time. So focus on these things, find these things that are important in financial domains and operational domains and clinical domains and satisfaction domains, and list them out and make sure they are radically transparent. Every single person in the organization should know exactly what they are. You don't have to give the detail on everything. You don't have to, it may be inappropriate for your behavior technicians to know what your financial objectives are, but you can let them know that there's financial objectives that the team is managing. Business leaders, in my perspective, in this industry, in all industries, in this industry in particular, have a responsibility to make sure that we are guiding organizations to be fiscally viable and fiscally sustainable. We have people who depend on us for their paychecks, for their college tuition payments, for their professional development. And as much as perhaps people would love to give all the clinical care away for free, because I know that that's we have really good-hearted people that work in this industry, there has to be a business side on the back end in order to facilitate that. We have frequently said at CCSN, we will take care, we strive to take care of our employees and their families, as well as our employees take care of our patients and our patients' families. And that means being able to provide competitive wages and strong benefits and time off and all of these things that are important, but all these things that have financial implications. So running a business that facilitates and allows for that is essential. In terms of the things that organizations may want to either stop or revisit if they're doing them, focusing on what some of those priorities are and allowing yourself to really zero in on what are the 2, 3, 4, 5 things that your organization is going to do in a prescribed period of time. I think one of the things you talked about it earlier, you have businesses that are growing, 3x in short amounts of time. One of the things that can be hard is that there is a lot of opportunity, there's a lot of demand, and how do you make sure that you have all the components in place so that if you're growing to meet that demand, or you're changing, or you're branching out to other areas, that you're doing so in a way that's planful and calculated? There's tremendous risk for growing too quickly. We've seen that across multiple industries, certainly in our industry too. I remember being at a conference and there was an ABA group who talked about that they were growing and they got into 4 states, and then only at that point did they realize that they were losing money on every transaction, and then they had to pull back from a bunch of states. There's a huge clinical implication to that, and not to mention careers, like that. The amount of stress that comes with that is completely overwhelming. So, for organizations that are not doing this, slow down, be thoughtful, be planful around what those initiatives are, and be focused. Better to do two or 3 things in a year really, really well than try to do 20 things 25% of the way there. There's way more organizational. It is a nonlinear relationship between the amount of stress your organization will experience from that.
So well said. It is a non-linear relationship. This is something that I've had that's been hard for me and critical for me to learn in my career. Is I want to do 50 things this year, and we recognize we're on a marathon, and if you're making your team sprint that entire marathon, they're going to puke. Full stop. So well said. All right. So where can people find you and CCSN online, Seth?
CCSN is located in Connecticut. So for those of you who want to brave the beautiful Connecticut winter weather, we are in Glastonbury. Our website is www.ccsnct.org. So CCSN as in Connecticut.org. We are actually about 90 days away from opening a new facility, which is exciting. So we've been planning this and working on this for years. And yeah, we're going to be opening another facility in Connecticut. It's going to be in Farmington, Connecticut. It's going to be a full replication of all of our behavioral health services. So we're really excited about that. There's been a lot of planning. We're looking at probably a mid-April start timeline. There's been a lot of demand, a lot of requests from school partners out there, from families who live in that area. And we're really excited. And, when we think around what are all the things that we needed to do to get to this point, and then what are going to be the things that we need to do from this point forward, there's certainly, we feel like we're on the right trajectory. And there's a lot of these areas that we've been investing in to make sure we have the right levels of clinical supervision and clinical coordination and administrative support and coordination and technology and all of these things. And, Jonathan, you said earlier, every time you triple, everything breaks. And I hadn't thought of it like that because we've never tripled before. But now I'm like, oh, crap, what's going to be the next thing that breaks? But I think, coming back to, a little bit around the change management piece in ADKAR, one of the things that we had to do as we moved into this as we brought in this insurance-based part of our organization, is go to a model of continuous quality improvement on our operational administrative side. So how do we ensure that we are continuing to have conversations and continuing to look at every single process and not allowing ourselves to get static? And that's it. That's a big cultural change to say, like, here's the process. Yep. Let's come back and look at it in 10 years, to saying, here's the process. Now, next week, let's look at it again and figure out where we have errors. And then the following week, we're going to be the exact same thing. And we're going to have this continuous period of refinement. And it's been really encouraging to see our team lean into that in such an effective way and start to do that. So as we're looking forward towards, our first replication, we've been leaning very heavily on our colleagues in the industry, through CAS, through Bulk, through other professional networks, to talk to them and say, hey, you guys have done this. How'd you do it? What'd you think about? How'd you figure out how many chairs you needed? Some of these really nuts and bolts things. But anyways, this is a long-winded question of what's our website, but nice. That was
I love it. And listeners, you can find Seth on LinkedIn. So check him out there. So, all right, Seth, are you ready for the last quick segment? Our hot take questions, rapid fire, quick, short answers. You all set?
Sure. Yep.
All right. You're on your deathbed. What's the one thing you want to be remembered for?
Being a good father.
What's your most important self-care practice?
In better times, it was sleep. we have a toddler right now. It's not happening so much.
Oh, toddlers and sleep, a good combination do not make. If you said could cancel all meetings and skip all your responsibilities for a day, how would you spend the day?
Probably going for a hike.
Nice. A man after my own heart. What's the best Beatles song ever?
Yesterday.
It's beautiful. Can I tell you, Seth? A huge puzzle fan, and in COVID did all kinds of puzzles. We did a 3,000 piece Beatles puzzle, which was phenomenal. But I'll tell you, it broke me, and I haven't done it ever since. But I love me some Beatles too. If you could give your 18-year-old self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Buy Bitcoin.
Again, a man.
No, you know what I say. Focus on the process as much as the outcome. I feel like the first part of my career, I was driving pretty hard at what I perceived to be the various golden rings that come along the way. And, my wife has been just such a wonderful support and partner. And she would say, slow down, this is the journey, enjoy it. And I think I heard her for years, but I didn't really get it until we had children. And she's been right this whole time, almost 13 years together. So,
well said. All right. Finally, if you could wear only one style of footwear for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Oh, I don't know. Running shoes. I don't even know what the right answer is there. What is the right answer?
There's no right answer. The right answer is what allows you to live your best life. Yeah, I think I'd have ski boots.
That's a good one. That's a good question. Well, not what I was expecting. Nice rapid fire, Jonathan. Good way to end it.
Right. This has been awesome, man. I feel like we could talk for hours more. I really appreciate your time and sharing all your wisdom.
Likewise. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Building Better Businesses in ABA podcast. Stay tuned for our next exciting episode. In the meantime, please like, subscribe, share, and comment. We value your feedback. Don't forget to follow us on social media at elementrcm.ai.